Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jaya Radha Govardhani, Radha Govardhani, Shri Radhe. Nittai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nittai Gaura Hari Bo. Jai Vishapar Brahma Hapsa Parivajaka Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Vishapar Paramahamsa Parivajaka Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarada Goswami Prabhupada Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premsakho Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopina Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. Maipur Navadvip Dham Ki. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki. Gangamai Ki. Tulsi Devi Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Nitai Gauda Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Can I get the book, Sham? Can you get the book? Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Thank you. Okay, so we'll continue reading from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita up to the Adi Lila chapter 10. Going from text number 86. Malira Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Malira Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Shaba Achadila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Malira Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Maliara Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Malira Achaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Malira Achaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Malira Achaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Saba Achadila. Any ladies like to chant? Malira Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila. Badiya Paschima Desha Shaba Achadila. Word for word. Malira Ichaya. On the desire of the gardener. Shaka. Branches. Bahuta. Many. Badila. Expanded. Badiya. So expanding. Paschima. Western. Desha. Countries. Saba. All. Achadila. Covered. Translation by His Divine Grace C.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. By the will of the Supreme Gardener, the branches of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami grew many times over, expanding throughout the Western countries and covering the entire region. Text number 87. Asindhu Adi Tira Ara Himalaya, Vrindavana Mathura Adi Yatra Tirthahaya. Translation. Extending to the borders of the rivers Sindhu and the Himalayan mountain valleys, they expanded throughout India, including all the places of pilgrimage such as Vrindavan, Mathura and Haridwar. Text number 88. Du Shakara Prema Pale Sakala Basila Prema Pala Svade Loka Unmata Hoila. The fruits of love of Godhead which fructified on these two branches were distributed in abundance. Tasting these fruits, everyone became mad after them. Text number 89. Paschimara Loka Saba Mudha Anachara Tahan Prachi Rila Donhe Bhakti Sadachara. Translation. The people in general on the western side of India were neither intelligent nor well behaved, but by the influence of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, they were trained in devotional service and good behaviour. Purport. Although it is not only in Western India that people were contaminated by association with the Mohammedans, it is a fact that the farther west one goes in India, the more he will find the people to be fallen from the Vedic culture. Even until 5,000 years ago, when the entire planet was under the control of Maharaj Parikshit, the Vedic culture was current everywhere. Gradually, however, people were influenced by non-Vedic culture, and they lost sight of how to behave in connection with devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami very kindly preached the bhakti cult in Western India, and following in their footsteps, the propagators of the Caitanya cult in the Western countries are spreading the Sankirtan movement and inculcating the principles of Vaishnava behaviour, thus purifying and reforming many persons who were previously accustomed to the culture of malekshas and yavanas. All of our devotees in the Western countries give up their old habits of illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating and gambling. Of course, 500 years ago, these practices were unknown, at least in Eastern India. But unfortunately, at present, all of India has been victimised by these non-Vedic principles, which are sometimes even supported by the government. Omagana Chamanandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chaksho Umidham Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaurabhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, please, that would be nice, thank you. Okay, so this section of this chapter of the Adi Lila is looking at the tree and branches of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is a very important branch of the Chaitanya tree, which came from Rupa and Sanatan, which I think were described as being the 43rd and 44th branches of the tree. 43rd and 44th was Sri Sanatan and Sri Rupa, and their brother Anupam was the 45th branch of the Chaitanya tree. So the Chaitanya tree is obviously quite wide and varied, but this is a very, very important branch, and Prabhupada, one of his purports 2 verses back, wrote quite a long purport. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yeah, he's obviously put a lot of weight into the importance of Rupa and Sanatan, because it was a 4 and a bit page purport, so it's obviously very, very significant, because the current Hare Krishna movement is based on the teachings primarily of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. Our practices of devotional service are based on the books and teachings coming from Rupa and Sanatan, so they're very, very important personalities. So there's some pictures there of Rupa and Sanatan. So I'll read a little bit here from some notes I took. So the activities of Rupa and Sanatan while they resided in Vrindavan are described by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Caitanya Charitamrita, the Madhya Lila, chapter 19, text 128 to 132. So it explains that the brothers, Rupa and Sanatan, have no fixed residence. They reside beneath trees, one night under one tree and the next night under another. Srila Rupa and Sanatan Goswami beg a little food from the houses of brahmanas, giving up all kinds of material enjoyment, and they only take some dry bread and fried chickpeas. They carry only water pots and they wear torn quilts. They always chant the holy names of Krishna and discuss his pastimes. In great jubilation they also dance. They engage almost 24 hours daily in rendering service to the Lord. They usually sleep only an hour and a half, and some days when they continuously chant the the Lord's holy names, they do not sleep at all. Sometimes they write transcendental literatures about devotional service, and sometimes they hear about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and spend their time thinking about the Lord. When the personal associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would hear the activities of Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, they would say, "What is wonderful for a person who has been granted the Lord's mercy?" So it's explained that Rupa and Sanatan would wander around the different forests of Vrindavan, and they would sleep under a different tree every night. And even when you go to Vrindavan today, there's all sorts of Pushpa Samadhis and Bhajan Kuters that you can visit, where Rupa and Sanatan would spend time writing the pastimes and writing various books about the Bhakti Shastras. So Sanatan Goswami occupies a special position in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. He's the Acharya of Sambandha Gyan, or knowledge of our proper devotional relationship with Krishna. Moreover, his deity Madan Mohan helps us to overcome the influence of the senses and fix our minds in devotional service. Sanatan Goswami's literatures are a storehouse of nectar. His personal example of humility is beyond description. He is an intimate associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha and Krishna. And he's also the guru of Rupa Goswami. So in Kavi Kanapur's Gaura Ganadesh Dipika, which we talked about recently, which lists all the personalities in Caitanya Lila and who their position is in Vrindavan, he explains that Rupa Manjari's closest friend, who is known by the names Rati Manjari and who's known by the name Rati Manjari and Lavanga Manjari, appeared in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Sri Sanatan Goswami, who is considered to be a personal extension of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when Sanatan Goswami, there's some images there on the slides. In the middle is Sanatan Goswami's Samadhi, and this is on the right-hand side is the Madan Mohan temple, which is established by Sanatan Goswami. And that was built by a rich merchant whose boat was travelling on the Yamuna River and became trapped on a sandbank, and he was lamenting about what he was going to do because he couldn't remove the boat from the sandbank. So he was told that you should go and see Sanatan Goswami. He's a sadhu who lives in Vrindavan, and he may be able to help you. So this merchant approached Sanatan Goswami saying, "Oh, please, can you help me?" And at that time, Sanatan Goswami was living in a simple grass hut. So he replied to the merchant, "Well, I'm just a simple renunciate beggar, so what can I do for you? You should speak to Madan Mohan," because at that time, Sanatan Goswami was worshipping Madan Mohan. And so the merchant approached the deity of Madan Mohan and said, "Oh, please, if you help me get out of the situation, then I'll build you a very wonderful temple." So that night rains came and the boat was lifted off the sandbar, and the merchant was able to carry on his way. And with all the proceeds he made from his sales, he was selling salt or something like that, I think it was, he was able to construct this very beautiful temple of Madan Mohan. And Sanatan Goswami is very, very pleased because he was only able to worship Madan Mohan in a very, very simple manner. Like he was a renunciate, he was a beggar, so he had no money. He was always lamenting that he couldn't offer more opulent worship to Madan Mohan. So Madan Mohan was understanding the mind of Sanatan Goswami, so made this wonderful arrangement for this merchant to become trapped on the bank and to build this very beautiful temple. And they continued the worship of Madan Mohan in a very opulent way. So when you visit Vrindavan, this is one of the important temples to visit. The original Madan Mohan Mandir. The original deities of Madan Mohan were removed to Rajasthan when they were being attacked by the Muslims who were invading Vrindavan and desecrating, destroying temples at the time. So the original deities were taken to Rajasthan. So the temple is still there, and you can go and chant your japa up there. It's a nice place to chant your japa when you visit Vrindavan. You can see the Yamuna River flowing. It's a very, very nice, tranquil place to visit. And also, as explained earlier on, that Sanatan Goswami is the Acharya of Sambandha Gyan, or establishing our relationship with Krishna. So this modern Madan Mohan form of the Lord is one that devotees to approach so we can re-establish our eternal relationship with Krishna. So as explained, Sanatan Goswami is the Sambandha Gyana Acharya, or the Acharya of connecting, re-establishing our relationship with Krishna. So after Sanatan Goswami met Lord Chaitanya in Varanasi, Lord Chaitanya instructed him to write books on devotional service and establish proper practices and behaviour for devotees, and to install deities and reveal the proper methods of deity worship, and to excavate the lost holy places of pilgrimage in Vrindavan. So Sanatan Goswami, it's explained that when he was residing in Vrindavan, because Vrindavan's quite a large area, there's different places you can visit within Vrindavan. When you go on the Braj Mandal Parakram, I think it takes 30 days to walk around Vrindavan. I haven't done it yet, but on my list of things to do, my transcendental list of things to do, is do the Parakram pilgrimage around Braj Mandal. I've been told that I should do at least once in this lifetime. So Sanatan Goswami, he would visit different villages in Vrindavan, and it's explained that when he would come to a village, all the people would greet him with tears of affection. Children in the villages saw him as a father, and elders saw him as their son, and people of his age saw him as a friend. They would say, "Please come to our homes." And when he would come, he would ask them, "How are your cows? Did your daughter get married? How is your health? How many calves did your calves give birth to?" He knew everything about everyone, and he was very intimately related to them. In this way, he captured everyone's hearts. He would spend hours discussing Krishna Katha and having Nam Sankirtan with them. He would open people's hearts so deeply that they would fully accept whatever he said. This was his method of preaching. He would conquer their hearts with his love and then fill them with Krishna. The next morning he would leave, and everyone would cry in separation, and then he would go to the next village. In this way, Sanatan Goswami travelled to the villages of Braj. So we know the prayers of the six Goswamis. It explains how they were very dear to everyone, whoever they were, whether they were wealthy or impoverished. They were very, very attached to Sanatan Goswami. So this is the symptom of someone who's very saintly, is that they're a friend to everyone. It's a sign of a devotee, is that they're the well-wishing friend to everybody. There's no envy in their heart. So they're not envying someone who has wealth or position or fame, whatever it may have. The sadhu or the Mahatma is seeing everyone as a spirit soul, and they actually realise that, and they're acting on that platform, so there's no envy there. So Sanatan Goswami, obviously he wasn't from this world, just like Srila Prabhupada is not from this world. So Sanatan and Rupa Goswami, they're from the transcendent realm. So when we hear about them, it's materially doesn't make a lot of sense about, as we were hearing earlier on, how could they only sleep for an hour each day, or explain that Sanatan Goswami would do Govardhan Parakram every day, and that's the outside Parakram path around Govardhan, which is like 40 kilometres, and he had to do this every day. I mean, just walking around the inner path of Govardhan, which is about 20 kilometres, is pretty hard, but he was doing the outer path, so quite phenomenal, incredible. So obviously Sanatan Goswami was instructed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to write books on devotional service, on bhakti. So there's many books that Sanatan Goswami wrote, Srimad Bhagavatam, Hari Bhakti Vilas, which are two very important ones. Digdarshani Tika, Sri Krishna Lila Stava, Sri Bhagavat Tipani, which is a commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam, Brihad Vaishnava Toshani, Lagu Toshani, and Dasama Charita. So he was a very prolific author, and I believe they were writing on, what's the parchments they'd write on? What were they called? Leaf parchments that they would write on. And you can actually still see these leaf parchments. I think the Bhaktivedanta Institute has got a library, and you can actually still, they have records, or they have the original manuscripts that these parchments with the scriptures that were written on by the Goswamis. And obviously Srila Prabhupada emphasised the importance of Hari Bhakti Vilas in particular, which was about 24 different chapters, which talks about how to be a devotee, the behaviour of Vaishnava, how to conduct oneself, how to observe festivals like Govardhan Puja and Janmashtami and so forth. So it's a very important book. And the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust has done the translation of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So among the important books compiled by Sanatan Goswami is the Hari Bhakti Vilas, and also the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So the Hari Bhakti Vilas expounds on Mahaprabhu's teachings to Sanatan Goswami regarding Vaishnava behaviour and ritual. The Brihad Bhagavatamrita analyses the ontological and metaphysics of Mahaprabhu's teachings. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Sanatan Goswami records the conversation that took place between Maharaj Parikshit and his mother Uttara after he had heard the Bhagavatam from Shukadev. She asked him to explain the gist of the Bhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj begins by telling the story of Narada's search for the most fortunate and intimate devotee of Krishna. This part of the conversation reveals the gradation of intimacy and devotional service, progressing from those devotees whose bhakti is mixed with karma and jnana. Narada progresses to Shantaras, Prahlad, Dasyaras, Hanuman, Sakyaras, Arjuna, and finally to Krishna's dearmost devotee Uddhava, who aspires for a position in Vrindavan and who reveals the love of the gopis for Krishna as his last word in bhakti. Part 2 of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita reveals the glory of Gopakumar, a cowherd boy who, having received mantra initiation from a resident in Vrindavan, passes through one planetary system after the next, exploring different levels of consciousness in a spiritual odyssey that takes him from Earth through the heavenly planets to Brahmaloka, Viraja, the Brahma Jyoti, Shivaloka, Vaikuntha, Ayoja, Dwarka, Mathura, and finally to Goloka Vrindavan, where he realises his eternal position in the pastimes of Krishna and Sakyaras. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there are descriptions of devotees, intimate devotees, most intimate devotees, and complete devotees. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 5, text 203, Sri Sanatan Goswami, the teacher of the science of devotional service, wrote several books, of which the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is very famous. Anyone who wants to know about the subject matter of devotees, devotional service, and Krishna must read this book. Yeah, so fortunately there is a BBT edition of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, so once you've finished reading all of Prabhupada's books and familiarise yourself, then there's a lot of nectar out there to read. Brihad Bhagavatamrita is one of those books. And I don't know if you were here when we had the Sacred Sound Retreat, and we had Bibi Govinda Maharaj was giving classes on the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Very, very ecstatic classes. Probably some of you would have heard those, but yeah, a lot of nectar there. So much nectar, too much nectar actually. Our lives are too short to absorb all this nectar. So it's a little bit about Sanatan Goswami. Of course, there's the whole backstory of Sanatan Goswami about how he was serving a Muslim ruler and how he had to escape from him. He had a government post. He was like a prime minister. He was very, very elevated. He was like, in British tradition, you have lords and ladies. He was like the equivalent of the lord. So he was very materially together and wealthy and had political power and influence, but he renounced all of that and became a renunciate. So there's the backstory to it, which we would have read over when we were reading this long purport, whoever gave the class. So the next is Rupa Goswami. So in the Gaura Ganatesh Dipika, which is written by the son of Shivananda Sain, Rupa Goswami is described to be the gopi named Sri Rupa Manjari. In the Bhakti Ratnakara, there is a list of books that Srila Rupa Goswami compiled. Of all of his books, the following 16 are the most popular among the Vaishnavas: Hamsaduta, Uddhava Sandesh, Krishna Janma Titi Vidi, Radha Krishna Ganodesh Dipika, Brihat and Lagu Bhagavatamrita, Stavamala, Vidagda Madhava, Lalita Madhava, Dana Kali Kumudi, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is Nectar of Devotion, Ujvala Nimali, Akyata Chandrika, Mathura Mahima, Pajavali, Nataka Chandrika, and Lagu Bhagavatamrita. So the BBT also has a edition of the Lagu Bhagavatamrita as well. And so these images here are also in Vrindavan. On the left-hand side That's Rupa Goswami's Samadhi. Looks a little bit different now if you've been to Vrindavan in the last few years, that they've built a big concrete, I guess you could call it a shade shelter over it, because it does get very, very hot when you go to Rupa Goswami's Samadhi, especially in the blazing Vrindavan sun. So they've built a big concrete structure over it, so there is a bit of shade there, but some people like it, some people don't. It's apparently quite a controversial thing amongst the bridge buses about building this concrete structure over Rupa Goswami's Samadhi. And in the middle there, that's the murti of Rupa Goswami. So when you go to the Samadhi, you'll see that murti of Rupa Goswami inside. And it's quite an interesting murti. You don't usually see murtis of saintly personalities in such a way he's sitting. It's a little bit different, but it's explained that in these Samadhis, the personality is still present there. So you can go and take darshan and pray to Rupa Goswami for his mercy. And on the right-hand side, that's Srila Prabhupada's quarters in the Radha Damodar Temple, and he could look outside the courtyard, and that was you could see that Samadhi when he'd look out taking his lunch and would meditate on Rupa Goswami as he was taking prasadam. So yeah, it's a very, very special place. I think Prabhupada said that the Radha Damodar Temple is like the hub of the spiritual world. That's where he did a lot of the translation of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can still visit these rooms that Prabhupada stayed in. You can go to his kitchen, and the other room is where his bed was and where he did a lot of his writing and translation work. So yeah, it's a very special place. Very nice temple actually, Radha Damodar Temple. So many wonderful places to visit in Vrindavan. So Rupa Goswami gave up all family connections and joined the renounced order of life following the footsteps of his brother Sanatan. He divided his money, giving 50% to the Brahmas and Vaishnavas and 25% to his Kutumba, family members, and keeping 25% for personal emergencies. He met Haridas Thakur in Jagannath Puri, where he also met Lord Caitanya and his other associates. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to praise the handwriting of Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami could compose verses according to the desires of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and by his direction he wrote 2 books named Lalita Madhava and Vidagda Madhava. Lord Chaitanya desired the 2 brothers Sanatan and Rupa Goswami to publish many books in support of the Vaishnava religion. So the writings and exemplary lives of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami have inspired generations of devotees in the disciplic line coming from Lord Chaitanya. The Hare Krishna movement is part of this line, and many devotees have carried on the literary exposition of Krishna consciousness. Thus the books of Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatan Goswami and their followers comprise the most voluminous, exacting and consistent body of spiritual literature in the world. So yeah, they're very prolific authors, and they were getting different shastras, scriptures to be brought into Vrindavan that they could work on and translate. And also they found a lot of the pastime places of Radha and Krishna as they were instructed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They excavated a lot of the original pastime places. So we're very, very thankful for the service that they did, because of Rupa and Sanatan we have all these scriptures, and we have these pastime places that we can visit in Vrindavan because of Rupa and Sanatan in particular. So we're called Rupa Nugas, followers of Rupa Goswami. And of course we have the Nectar of Devotion, which is the main book that guides us in our devotional practices of sadhana, and also talks about sadhana bhakti and also Raghunuga bhakti as well, more elevated and advanced forms of practicing devotional service. So it's a very large subject matter talking about the Goswamis, and we don't have so much time, and there has a lot been covered in the previous purports as well. So there are some nice pastimes of, there's some books by Rupa Goswami, Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion. Laghu Bhagavatamrita, that's also a BBT publication. Well worth reading when you finish all of Prabhupada's books and become expert in Prabhupada's books. So there's lots of wonderful pastimes of Rupa and Sanatan when they were residing in Vrindavan. And also even before they came to Vrindavan, when they were serving the Muslim politician. They were living in a place called Ramakeli, and they created a miniature Vrindavan in this Ramakeli and a Madan Mohan temple, a Radhakund and a Shamakund, and you can still visit this Ramakeli. I don't know, has anyone here been to Ramakeli at all? No, it sounds like quite a beautiful place from what I've heard. Apparently in the 1920s they did a restoration of the temple there, so it sounds like it's quite a nice facility they have in Ramakeli. So this is one nice pastime. So one day Rupa Goswami wanted to prepare some sweet rice for Sanatan Goswami, but didn't have the necessary provisions for making the sweet rice in his kutir. At that time, she who brings about the fulfillment of the inner aspiration of the devotee, Srimati Radharani, could understand everything. So in the dress of a young gopi girl, she brought milk, rice and sugar to Rupa Goswami, saying, Swamiji, Swamiji, I have brought you a gift of uncooked rice. Please accept it. Hearing the words of the young girl, Sri Rupa Goswami opened the door to his hut and looked out. There he saw a beautiful young gopi maiden with some offerings of food. Rupa Goswami said, Little girl, why have you come here? Swamiji, I have only brought you some simple uncooked food. Why have you taken so much trouble for me? Babaji, what trouble? I have only come to render humble service to a saintly person. Accepting the offering of milk, sugar and uncooked rice, Rupa Goswami said, Young girl, please take your seat while I put these things away. The girl said, I'm sorry, but I have some work to do. Saying this, the girl disappeared. When Rupa Goswami turned around and saw that she had gone, he was very bewildered by all this. At length, he prepared the sweet rice and offered the bhoga to his deity, Govindadev. After some time, he gave the prasad to Sanatan Goswami, who had just arrived. While honouring the prasadam, Sanatan Goswami experienced an unusual and enchanting kind of joy. He asked Sri Rupa, where did you get this milk and rice from? Rupa said, a young gopi girl came by and gave it to me. Sanatan said, a young girl just came by all of a sudden and gave you this milk and rice? Rupa Goswami replied, yes, she just came by all of a sudden. The strange thing is, I was just thinking, how can I make some sweet rice for Sanatan? And she just appeared as if by magic, with this milk, rice and some sugar. Hearing of this, tears of prema began to fall from the eyes of Sanatan Goswami. He said, can't you recognise something when it's right before your eyes? It was Sri Radha Takarani herself who has brought you milk and rice. By accepting service from her, we are ruined. Now we shall never attain our desired goal. In this way, Sanatan Goswami continually condemned himself again and again for having accepted service from that person whom he most aspired to serve, Sri Radha Takarani. This pastime of Sri Sanatan Goswami is recorded in Bhakti Ratnakara. So there's all sorts of wonderful pastimes where we can see that Rupa and Sanatan were definitely not from this world, and a completely different state of consciousness to us. There's another famous pastime from the Bhakti Ratnakara. Sanatan Goswami would make the 4-mile pilgrimage around Govardhan Hill every day, but because of his old health, this was very troublesome. Still, he did not want to break his religious principles by not circumambulating Govardhan Hill, and so he would suffer great physical hardship while circumambulating Govardhan. The Lord knows everything, and thus he could understand the pain his devotee Sanatan was experiencing. He decided to do something about this. One day, a little Gopa boy came to Sanatan and said, Baba, you are old. Don't go to such trouble to walk around Govardhan Hill. Sanatan said, This is one of the regular principles of my bhajan. I must maintain it. The boy said, since you are old, you may now give up this rule. Sanatan said, I will never give up my religious principles. Krishna then told him, Baba, won't you honour my words? Sanatan said, if it is honourable, then I shall honour it. At that time, Krishna presented Sanatan Goswami with a Govardhan Shila, a stone bearing the mark of his own lotus feet, and said, this Govardhan Shila, a piece of stone from Govardhan itself. Sanatan said, what shall I do with it? Krishna said, if you circumambulate this Govardhan Shila, your vow of walking around Govardhan Hill every day will remain intact, for by circumambulating this, you circumambulate Govardhan Hill, and you will thereby get the same result. Keep your vow intact and not compromise your religious principles. Srila Sanatan Goswami was silenced. He could understand that Giriraj himself had given him the Shila. From that day forward, he used to circumambulate the Govardhan Shila marked with the divine marks of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. And so this Govardhan Shila is now being worshipped in the Radha Damodar Temple, so you can still see this same Shalagam Shila, just like we have Giriraj here on our altar, on the right-hand altar at the lotus feet of Krishna and Balaram. So they have a Govardhan Shila, which was presented to Sanatan Goswami by Krishna himself. So, as is explained, Sanatan would circumambulate this Govardhan Shila, just like when we have our Govardhan Puja festival here on the farm, and Giriraj comes down to Govardhan at the bottom, and we can all circumambulate. So by circumambulating Giriraj, it's just non-different from doing a whole Govardhan parakram, maybe a little bit easier on the feet. It's quite hard doing Govardhan when you walk around the actual Govardhan in Vrindavan. There's thorns and prickles and stones and all sorts of purification for your feet when you're walking around Govardhan in India. So we're very fortunate that Giriraj has manifested here in this wonderful form, and we can circumambulate him when he comes out of the temple. And obviously, when you go to Radha Damodar, you can have darshan of this Govardhan Shila. There's other pastimes. I won't go into them because we're not going to have time. Krishna Kirtan Prabhu mentioned today was Purushottam Das Thakur's appearance day today, according to the Vaishnava calendar. So I thought we could maybe talk a little bit about Purushottam Das Thakur before the class finishes, as we can hear about another famous pastime. So Purushottam Thakur was previously the cowherd boy named Daman in Braja. He was born in a Brahmana family as a son of Sadashiva. That's also from the Guru Ganadishtapika by Shivananda, who was written by Shivananda Sain's son. Daman was one of the 12 Gopas and companion of Krishna in his childhood pastimes in Braj. In the 11th chapter of the Adi Lila of the Caitanya Caritamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has listed Purushottam Thakur amongst the devotees of Lord Nityananda. Sadashiva Kaviraj was a great personality. Purushottam Das was his son. From birth, Purushottam Thakur was absorbed in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and he always engaged in the childish play with Lord Krishna. His son was named Sri Kanu Thakur, a very respectable gentleman. His body was saturated with the nectar of love for Lord Krishna. Vrindavan Das Thakur has also named Purushottam Thakur as one of Nityananda Prabhu's chief associates. Sadashiva Kaviraj was very fortunate to have a son like Purushottam Das. Purushottam Das Thakur had no external consciousness of his body, for Nityananda Prabhu was constantly acting through him. For 4 generations, the family of Purushottam Das Thakur consisted of eternally perfect direct associates of Mahaprabhu, Kamsari Sain, Sadashiva Kaviraj, Purushottam Thakur and Kanu Thakur. The Guru Ganadishtapika identifies Kamsari Sain as Ratnavali Saki and Sadashiva Kaviraj as Chandravali. Purushottam Das Thakur's wife was named Janavi Devi. She died while her son Kanu Thakur was just a young child. Nityananda Prabhu named the boy Shushu Krishna Das. It is said that Nityananda Prabhu's wife Janava Devi adopted Kanu and took him with her to Vrindavan. Some say that he was also one of the 12 Gopas. One legend about Kanu Thakur holds that when in Vrindavan, while he was dancing in Kirtan, his ankle bell or ankle bracelet flew off. He vowed that he would make his residence wherever the ankle bracelet was recovered. When it was found in the town of Bodkana in Jeshore district, he established his Shripat there. In the opinion of some, Madhavacharya, Madhava Chattogopadhyaya of Jirat in the Huguli district, the husband of Nityananda Prabhu's daughter Ganga Devi was Purushottam Thakur's disciple. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur has the following to say about Purushottam Das Thakur Shripat. Quote, Purushottam Das Thakur lived at Shukasagara, midway between Chakadaha and Sumurali railway stations. The deities he installed were formerly served in Balidanga village, but when the temple fell into the river, the deities were taken to Shukasagara. That temple was also swallowed by the Ganges, and so the deities were brought with Janava Mata's deity to Sahib Danga Barigram. Since that place was also destroyed, all the deities were again moved about 3 or 4 miles to the village named Chandu Rigram on the banks of the Ganges, about 1 mile up from Palpara. Devakinandan Das, the author of Vaishnava Vandana, was Purushottam Thakur's disciple. He writes, quote, I worship Sadashiva Kaviraj with great attentiveness. He was constantly intoxicated with love and had no external consciousness. I bow down to my worshipful Lord Purushottam Thakur, who can list his incomparable qualities. He was merciful to those who were devoid of virtue, displaying the natural power of his compassion. When only 7 years old, he was so intoxicated with love for Krishna that he danced in a way that enchanted the entire world. The following supplementary information is given in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Abhidhana. Quote, some people say that Purushottam's surname was Naga, while others say that the name Naga comes from the name of the area where he lived. Since the 5 villages, Balidanga, Baligram, Sukasagara, Manaspota and Palpara are so close together, this area is sometimes called Naga Radesh. Purushottam once ate snake poison when in a trance state without experiencing any ill effects. This was a source of great astonishment to all who witnessed it. Many of Nityananda Prabhu's associates often displayed such miraculous powers. So he's definitely a follower of Nityananda Avadut. Sounds like he was an Avadut as well. Also from the spiritual, the transcendent realm. So anyway, I guess we better wrap things up because it's 8:30. So I don't know if anybody had any questions or anything they'd like to add to what we've talked about with Rupa and Sanatan Goswami and some of their pastimes and Purushottam Das Thakur. Today's a nice day to meditate and pray to this personality, Purushottam Das Thakur, who's an associate of Lord Nityananda, that on these appearance days that their mercy is more freely available, so we can take advantage and offer wonderful prayers and remember this great personality, Purushottam Das Thakur, Purushottam Das Thakur. So shall we stop and have prasadam? Dancing, chanting, now we can do the feasting. It's our favourite part. Oh, you had a question?
One time, Rupa Goswami was chanting at the banks of Radhakund, very deeply absorbed. Very, very hot sun, especially middle of summer in Vrindavan, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just about to faint. And again, a village girl, a very young girl, not even, just about before the teenage girl. And she came very humbly, Swamiji, Guru Maharaj, that's how they address the saintly persons. You're suffering, can I bring an umbrella for you? And he woke up, and she was there with the umbrella, holding above Rupa Goswami.
I think it was part of her sari.
Yeah,
it was her sari. Yeah.
And Sanatan Goswami came along, seeing the sight, and Radharani disappeared.
Hmm.
So she was Radharani. And Rupa Goswami also realized, oh, this is extraordinary. Someone came along. Because he was in samadhi state with trance, very deeply absorbed in holy names, and the pastimes of Radha and Guru. And Sanatan Goswami became furious at Rupa Goswami. How dare to accept service from Radharani. So from that on, Sanatan Goswami built a hut for his brother, younger brother. So you stay here, don't accept any service from Radharani anymore.
I think there's a painting of that pastime at Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's Samadhi on the banks of Radhakund. There's a famous painting there of that pastime. Yeah. So many wonderful pastimes. You know, Te Kadamba, right, where Rupa Goswami was feeling such lamentation and separation that the trees would lose all their leaves, you know. Such is the nectar of the spiritual realm.
Just quickly, that pastime of that boat coming lodged in the banks of the river was salt. Just before that, during that period, sort of Sanatan Goswami was worshipping the Madhana Mohan very austerely. He was making little dough balls for him. And the Lord complained to him once, you can't even put a little bit of salt
Didn't he say, oh, if I give you salt, the next year you'll be wanting sweets and all sorts of things, so just be satisfied with what you've got. But yeah, he said Sanatan Goswami was very happy that this wonderful Madan Mohan Mandir was built so then he could opulently worship his Madan Mohan Murti. Anyway, shall we stop there? Aye. Shri Sanatan Rupa Goswami's ki jai, Purushottam Das Thakur ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami ki jai, Gaura Premanandi.